which a thought or a statement can be true or false. And it's and in the categories, I recommended a reading that got you to think about, according to the categories, what must be true about anything in order for anything to be something.
Sweetheart.
Talking to me? Never mind.
No, sorry. No, all right. I thought my mic was turned off. Sorry about that. Yes, you are a sweetheart.
I appreciate it. That's very motivating to hear words like that once in a while. Okay, so in order for anything to be something, right? Regardless of what it is, we're not talking about perceivable objects only, or imperceptible objects, or any of the standard terms of object. We're just thinking about something as a stand-in for being. We were able to develop out of what the categories gave us that anything to be something must stand in certain dependence relations. Okay, and those dependence relations are there are different kinds of dependence, and the kinds of dependence that Aristotle gives us are, he names them. Right? These are not things you find in your backyard, or not things you find in the solar system or under a microscope. Right? He names these forms of dependence that anything must be involved in order to be something rather than nothing. And those, and so the names that we get are substance and accidents, particular and universal. So we didn't go that deeply into the categories, but we wanted to see what happens when we look at how far Aristotle gets us just by thinking about what are the presuppositions that, and these presuppositions are dual-sided. On the one side, they are the presuppositions that for a statement or a thought to be true or false, right? And the other side is that whatever is thought with a thought that can be true or false is going to be in specific dependence relations. Some things are going to depend on other things. Other things are going to have some things depend on them. Now, this is very abstract. This is very this is not a rich and supple conception of reality yet. Okay, we have work to do to get to something a little bit more substantive. But I did want you to look at the think about what we're doing as stepping stones along the way of trying to get at more and more fine-grained understanding that anything about what anything must be in order to be something, and therefore in order to be. Okay, so in order to be, it must be involved in or entwined in dependence relations, and that those are what allow things to be. So that was the categories. Now we're going into the metaphysics, and we're actually looking at Aristotle's groundwork for establishing knowledge or science of being. Right, that would be that knowledge that thinks being, and it would be that being that would be the reality of things that is thought. So we're much closer to this Parmenidean goal in the metaphysics than we were in the categories. But it's messy and difficult, and so we are just going to trudge along and do our best to get some of this stuff. Now, that is what I wanted to say as prelude. I kind of want to remind you of the overarching framework, right? The whole point is ultimately to understand soul, right? And in order to understand soul, But we need to understand what it is to be soul. And in order to be soul, we need to understand what it is to be anything, and what's specific about soul. What kind of dependence relations make it necessary to talk about soul rather than, substance, or rather than action, or rather than techne, or any of the other things that we're gonna touch on a bit. So I see Clark has a question. So before we launch into today's readings, I'm happy to take a couple questions.
Yeah, thanks. Michael, so I just had this image. You said anything to be something must stand in dependent relationships.
Right.
So I get that. And what the image came to mind was, well, let me first say my biggest struggle so far generally, although I think I have much deeper struggles I'm not aware of, they're just barely there for me. So uh, is this concept that there can be something that can be considered to be true that is independent of empirical evidence of its truth. It's demonstrative evidence of its truth. So you back a while back contrasted to me, there's ontological aspects that what we're interested in looking at right here is the ontological aspects of how these dependent relationships can create a narrative that gives you the sense that this is actually something. And I was just thinking that triangulation is an interesting concept to me, because I don't have to know what something is, but I can use the relationships to that unknown mystery to triangulate myself and actually give myself a positional perspective on it, that's something a step ahead, a step forward from just being completely relativistic about it.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that's accurate, that there's a kind of triangulation that's going on here in the conceptualizations of dependent relationships as far as leading you towards some sense of confidence that we're actually talking about something here. That's ontological. I mean, I'm talking about the ontological aspect, because it just doesn't, it's new to me, and I'm suspicious of it.
That makes it makes sense. I guess what I want to say to that is that what makes the empirical something? And if we just beg the question, say, well, the empirical is just something, and that's how I personally define something. Now, and Aristotle is going to critique this, right? We're in an inquiry about the causes of all things and not just of some things. And if we limit our science to just some things, well, then we don't really understand. Namely, we don't understand what they are, and we don't understand whether they are themselves caused by something either caused by something ontologically higher, ontologically prior, or whether the cause of things that seem higher. And so, so the ultimate problem is just, if you start with the empirical, you start arbitrarily, because you're assuming that the empirical is something. And we're going a step higher, and we're saying, well, what is it to be something? Maybe the empirical is something, but what is it to be something? And it's only when we understand what it is to be something, can we say whether the empirical is something, or whether it's the illusion of something, or whether it seems like it's just one thing, whereas in fact it's many things. Many different things, maybe incompatible things. So those are the kind of the prior questions that metaphysics is going to demand that we ask and try to answer before we jump ahead and say, well, there's these reliable objects around me, and that's what reality is, and I'm just going to define it that way, because that's random. I don't know if I've addressed your concerns, but we can circle back to them. But I'm going to take a couple hands. I saw Philip and then Nick.
There I go. So thinking of being or one, I'm thinking of the one is this And I don't think it means interpenetration.
Mm,
I don't think it means coextensive.
mhm.
It's not a spatial metaphor. I'm not sure that it is meant by Aristotle in a Hegelian way. I'm not sure there's dynamic. I don't know it, but I think, okay, if this is true, then when I use the concept being, I can
Mhm.
also use the concept thinking. And when I use the concept thinking, I could also use the concept being.
Mm,
So, and if I say that thinking and being are one, then
mhm.
that would also lead me to believe that I would define chaos as the unthought.
Ah,
Chaos is non-being.
mhm.
Um, and I'm thinking, I'm throwing a bunch of stuff. I'm also thinking about the Hebraic creation myth, where God thinks being. God's thinking creates being.
Mhm.
Except
Mhm.
it's not, we think of it as causal like that. It's not
Right,
causal.
right.
God thinks being.
Mhm.
Being is the thought of God. They're not separate, and it's not
Exactly.
temporally separate. Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yeah, no. Awesome. Right. I'm going to say something really quick to that. Aristotle says being is said in many senses, or being is said in many ways, and so not in every one of those ways would it be possible to substitute thinking for being.
Hmm.
Right. So, so we wouldn't be able to say just kind of this blanket. Whenever I want to say, the book is red, I could also say the book thinks red. That would make no sense. And I know that's not what you wanted to
No, no,
imply,
no, no.
but
But I
that would.
wondered, could Heidegger's book, his 1927 tome, be called Thinking and Time?
Thinking of what?
Thinking and Time. We call it Being and Time,
Oh, right.
but
Oh,
could it be called
yeah.
Thinking and Time?
I see. Well, yeah. So, yeah. Right. I'm
Yeah,
not quite sure what to do with that, but
I was just reading a summary of notes I did on that, and since he believes that existence precedes essence, that's why it's that way, Philip. Otherwise, it would be thinking and time.
yeah, Heidegger's an interesting case, but
Thank you, Bob.
I think he's close. I think he's closer than than that. But okay, that's separate. So, Tyler, I saw you kind of waving your hand. Nick's before you, but did you want to refer specifically to Philip? If so, I'll let you cut in line.
I did want to just quickly address
Okay.
chaos. All I really want to say is that Aristotle actually points this out, that being something like, say, disordered is different than being not ordered. So chaos is a determinate state of affairs.
Mm.
There's a lack of order, but is not the absence of order. So, and he'll use this with artifacts that are broken, right? There's a difference between something that has ceased to be an artifact and something that is a broken artifact, like a musical instrument. And so I think, according to Aristotle, chaos would not count as non-being.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the thought. I mean, it's kind of speculative at this point, but we don't have enough text foundation to say one way or another. But I think it's an important distinction to keep in mind. So thanks for bringing it up, Nick.
Yeah, just I wanted to kind of ask about the word soul you
Yeah.
mentioned, and it also shows in the text. So because we have a Christian background, we kind have this notion of soul as something persisting and afterlife and so. But from a Greek understanding, or how Aristotle used it, could you unpack soul for us in how the Greeks thought about it and what he meant by that?
Oh, right. So it was soul is a translation from the Greek psyche, right? And we derive the term psychology from psyche, and psyche is, along with zoon, from which we get zoology, is a way of it is is a kind of name for living things. So anything that is alive has a principle in it that that organizes a life form to maintain its own life form. And that principle, which he calls the form of a living body, is what he calls soul. So soul is that set of activities through which a living thing maintains itself. And it's interesting that you bring up the Christian dimension, because when Christian theology and the scholastics were busily appropriating as quickly as possible Aristotelian thought, right, they ran into this problem that Christian doctrine demands, or Christian doctrine promises, that the soul is not only immortal, but it's in its particularity. So you'll have your own memories, and you'll recognize people in the afterworld, and you'll be reunited with those you love, and everything like that. But Aristotle's point is that the soul is the form of a body, and if the body dissolves, it doesn't have form anymore. And so an Aristotelian soul can't be immortal. And so, right. And so there, that created a lot of text to try to deal with how a soul, what must a soul be besides being the form of a living body, such that it could be immortal.
And what is, I'm sorry, just
please.
another layer of what is the form of a living body? And living body means any living body, which means
Exactly.
animals, insects.
Exactly. So, right. I think that one of the major things that we have to grapple with through the metaphysics is to understand better what Aristotle means by form, so that when we do get to the soul, it won't be quite so perplexing to hear him say that the soul is the form of a living body, or a living corporeal thing. So I'm not going to prejudice that right now by trying to make sense of it. We have a lot of work to do to understand form in Aristotle, and we notice from the physics form, when he talks about ratio and account, that form and essence, form seems very hard to get a grasp on. So that's going to be part of our group effort, is to really find those passages where he talks about form that help us understand what he's talking about when he talks about form as one of the four causes. So yeah, that's kind of a promissory note. Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Sorry, Mike, I saw your hand up very briefly, and I'd love to hear from you if you still feel like talking.
Oh, just rather changing question. So in the ancient Greek notion of soul, do they think that only humans can have souls, or any living body? That
any living thing, anything alive is ensouled. Right. And the question of immortality, and Aristotle is going to touch the question of immortality, and he's going to make clear that it's not the soul that's immortal, it's an aspect of the intellect. And so that's the last thing that we have to, that's the last rung to ascend. And that's going to be, what's the difference between soul and intellect? And it's very important to me, very important, that we understand that intellect has been translated variously. And so many things are actually just intellect. It's been translated, and here importantly, as spirit. So in the philosophical theological discourse of spirit, and for instance, the so-called Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit's role in the Trinity, these are all translations of intellect. And we cannot understand the discourse, the Western discourse of spirit, without understanding its derivation from first Aristotelian and then the Platonian development of this concept of intellect that really comes at, which is the Greek is nous, and okay. Yeah. So nous, intellect. Nous is translated as intellect, is as spirit, as reason, and as understanding, and as comprehension, and as intuition. right? So this, you know, for us, reason and intuition are totally opposite things. The translation of the same thing, nous, it's nous. Right? So it's part of our job as people who want to understand the archaeology of modernity and the concepts that have been passed on to us, right? What happened that allowed reason and intuition that are the same thing to be positioned as polar opposites? You know, what kind of historical developments in the history of thought led to this perplexing opposition of something that began as one? Okay, yeah. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to do my little learned digressions. All right, but I think that this text is very difficult, and I think it's easy to lose hope that there's just anything to be understood here. And I just wanted to, I kind of want to continually give you the reminders that we're going somewhere. And even if a text that we're studying just doesn't seem like it has arms and legs or no interconnections, we're going somewhere and things will gel. Okay, I see a lot of things going on in chat. I'm not quite sure if anybody wants to bring up anything from the chat level to the spoken level, feel free, but I'm always so busy thinking about what people are saying and thinking about the text. I never have a chance to look at the chat. So it's not because I think it's unimportant, but just I don't have the bandwidth. But so please, if you think of anything, if anything interesting happens in the chat that you'd love to hear more group discussion or my remarks on, please feel free to bring it up. Okay. Oh, we got a double hand here, Tristan.
Yes, I want to emerge to the spoken from the chat really quick. I was asking about, I think we might have addressed this before, but I have a fuzzy memory of it, in regards to the four causes. For Aristotle, I want to know, like, how far, like, what things can we address with that? Can we address, like, everything? Such as mountains. Like, I'm thinking about, because I know we were talking about, like, I don't know, tools and things that, like, I don't know, human knowledge, whatever, virtues,
Right.
but what about, like, things that aren't living, that category, like
Right.
Mountains, clouds? Can you find four causes in each of those? Is that what he wanted to do, or where are we drawing the line again? I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't think we talked about drawing the line. There was some conversation about whether the four causes are involved in the being of anything, right? Or whether some things are only a composite of two or three of them rather than all four. It seems, and we haven't really inquired into that yet, and that's kind of more of a. This is a question that would be more profitably pursued in his book Physics, because it's the science of anything that moves, and so, or it's the science of motion in that sense. And here we'd have to look at, the things that he explores and tries to comprehend in the physics. Are they always employing all four causes or not? One thing we did point out was that often what he calls the formal cause is identical with the formal cause is identical with the for the sake of which, or the purpose or the end. Right, and so here we would have three causes because two of them are identical, and that suggests to us that sometimes causes coincide with one another depending on what we're talking about. But I would say, as a general answer to your question, all knowledge acquisition must be guided by method. If we do it randomly, there is no guarantee that our results are reliably one. And Aristotle is not only showing that every inquiry has used one or more of the four causes, but that employing the four causes in any new inquiry is necessary in order to get at the nature of the thing we're talking. So we employ the four causes as a tool of investigation, and then see what the kind of thing that we're investigating yields. Is it a kind of thing where the purpose is separate from the form? Is it the kind of thing where the form and the purpose are coincide? If it's a mathematical object, right, studying triangles, you're not going to need efficient causes. So here we have an example right away in the mathematical world where the efficient causes drop out. And so we're only going to have maximum 3 causes. So I hope that it makes it a little bit more specific. Okay, thanks for your questions, guys. Super interesting stuff, and I love these questions because it gives us as a group kind of a more collectively clear sense of some of the stuff we've been talking about in Aristotle, and hopefully Aristotle will be starting to take on a little bit more distinct form as we get deeper into these texts. So, knowledge. Let's look at, so I originally wasn't going to include book 6, chapter 2, but given Nick's justified remarks about practical reason a couple of sessions ago, I thought it would be informative to see how the theoretical and the practical collaborate in ethical thought. And so he does get to that a little bit here in 6.2. So we're not going to have time to read absolutely every paragraph, but let's just pick out and see, make sure that we kind of understand, especially, what is craft knowledge? How does scientific knowledge differ from theoretical wisdom and such things? But I did want to start here where the page is already open. And if somebody wouldn't mind just kind of reading the first 2 paragraphs, and we just get and what we're looking for here is how Aristotle thinks the relationship of theoretical truth to practical deliberation. They're not mutually exclusive. Is anybody willing to read?
I can read.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Clark, were you raising your hand to read? Okay, sorry, you're muted, but that's okay. You get to read next time. Okay, thank you, Mike.
So starting with what assertion?
No, start with 3 things.
Okay, sure. 3 things in the soul control action and truth: perception, understanding, and desire. Of these, perception is not a starting point of any action. This is clear from the fact that wild beasts have perception, but do not share in action. What assertion and denial are in the case of thought, that in the case of desire, I think I read that wrong. What assertion and denial are in the case of thought, that in the case of desire, is precisely what pursuit and avoidance are. So, since virtue of character is a deliberately choosing state, and deliberate choice is deliberative desire, it follows that both the reason must be true and the desire must be correct. If indeed the deliberate choice is to be an excellent one, and the very things the one asserts, the other must pursue. This, then, is practical thought and truth. In the case of thought that is theoretical, however, and neither practical nor productive, the good state and the bad state are truth and falsity, since that is the function of every part involving thought. But in the case of the part involving practical thought, the good state is truth in agreement with correct desire.
Awesome, thank you. All right. So if anybody who has already read this, maybe you just take a stab at how he's thinking the relationship between a theoretical truth and a practical truth. What's kind of going on here? I saw in Peter's chat that there's a parallelism that he's using here with assertion and denial. And it's no surprise that we always come back to, assertion and denial as that combination of linguistic items that allows for a statement that can be true or false.
I'm
Okay.
just gonna butt in because if I'm
Beautiful.
sharing the screen, that doesn't allow me to raise my hand, and so I can't.
Oh, yeah. No, always butt in. You're always welcome to do that. Anybody is really.
I was just going to point out that throughout the whole Nicomachean ethics, it talks about a positive versus a negative aspect to something. So even in the earlier parts we didn't read, the mean is between, say, with respect to consuming things, there's an overflow on the positive side is gluttony, and an underflow on the negative side is complete abstinence. And the mean is finding the right balance to maintain health or whatever it is. But so here we have, again, a positive and a negative with respect to thought, which would be assertion and denial. And with respect to action would be pursuit and avoidance. So again, it's that positive and negative thought in two different ways of dealing with, or two different of these approaches, of the 5 approaches to truth that he outlines in a couple of sections here.
Right. Excellent. Yeah. Anybody want to add to what Peter said, or question it, or something? Or did you have another thought about what's going on here?
There is a sense that assertion is the embrace of truth. Much like pursuit, in the case of desire, is the embrace of the desired object. And I think he's using, in this case, so he uses the word understanding in the first paragraph.
Yep.
And then the second, he uses the word thought. Are these the same?
No. I mean, they might function the same. I might have to look at that a little bit more closely, but just in terms of the word used, no. So I got a couple of hands. I got Tom and then Garth. And yeah, okay. Oh, okay. Tom, Garth, and Tim.
Okay, thank you. I think that the distinction that Aristotle is making right here is between theoretical thoughts are evaluated in terms of agreement with truth, whereas practical thought or practical knowledge is evaluated in terms of correspondence to correct desire.
All right.
So that's all.
Great. No, and I think that's absolutely right, Tom. And what I'd like to just bring a little bit more into focus, but I'm going to call on Garth and Tim first, is what role is theoretical truth playing? And I think Peter elaborated that without making the idea concrete. But anyway, let me Garth and.
Yeah, I'm wondering what is it that is true here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay, great. And I think, like I said, I think Peter suggested that, and I'm going to, and if Tim doesn't want to talk about that, then I'm going to let Tim talk, and then we'll get back to your question, which is an excellent one and an important one here.
Basically, what Tom said is pretty much succinctly states what I was thinking, but I did have a question about paragraph 1. This is clear from the fact that the wild beasts have perception but do not share in action. I mean,
Right.
is the assumption there that maybe the second paragraph is the assumption so that animals don't have any bearing on truth, and so whatever desires they have are irrespective of truth? What does it mean that wild beasts have perception but do not share in action?
Yeah, it has to do with his very specific understanding of action that we're hopefully going to get to in this section. And just briefly, it's that actions, we act in this Aristotelian sense when we seek to do what we think it's good to do. We seek to do it well. So acting well, acting excellent, performing any action virtuously, that is excellently, is action. So Aristotle will say that action is action is I don't even know how to say this. Action is a movement or an activity that has its end in itself. It is its own end. And in that special sense, he says that animals don't act because they don't seek to make their actions conform to an understanding of what a good action is.
So that means that a starting point must have a good intention.
Yeah. So the desire to do what is good for oneself, like, to make oneself healthy. It's because I want to be healthy that I eat certain foods and do certain activities, and so it's the end, my health, that is the starting point, which initiates certain activities. Eating, I don't just eat, but in light of the good, I desire to eat well.
Okay, I have some issues with that, but of course I don't understand all of it totally yet, but I'll just take that as the surface, the answer, and I'll raise my questions later. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Before I get to Tyler, I just want to, okay, Tyler, actually, you might be answering this question, so I'm just going to leave it up to you. Go ahead and speak.
I'm not sure. I'm probably not answering the question, but I was going to point out that at the end here, he says, the good state is truth in agreement with correct desire, which means that truth can be in disagreement. And this, I think, is very similar to the tripartite soul in Plato, where you can potentially know what is good, but not have the desire for what is good at the same time.
Right.
And so one of the things deliberate choices allow a human being to do is select to do the good thing that they do not desire until it can become a habit, which is when the truth becomes in agreement with correct desire.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I totally agree that the way he's written it, it's possible for these two things to diverge. And I think it's interesting that you bring in the habit or the hexis aspect. Yeah. So I got to think about that some more. But before we roll past this, I did just want to point out that Peter did bring out this whole golden mean thing, that practical deliberation is finding out what the extreme options of a particular act would be, and then seeking something. So since each extreme would be a distortion or a perversion of the act, right? It turns it into a bad act by choosing the extreme, right? We deliberate middle between the extremes that would allow us to act well. And my only point here is a very simple one: is that thinking about the extremes and thinking about what's in between them and how an act can achieve its end without falling into one of the extremes. These are all what we'd call theoretical truths, right? We must know what we're talking about, and things must be as we say when we assert that we have extreme A and extreme B, and we need to find a C that's somewhere in between. So this whole deliberative process relies on, but is not itself, theoretical knowledge. And so this helps us understand the way in which these two domains are not mutually exclusive, but in fact, ideally work in harmony with one another to initiate ethical action. Right. All right. So that was the main point I wanted to get out of. And so, Garth, I hope that that addressed your question. That's the role of truth here in the theoretical sense. And what correctness is, he'll talk about later. But did you want to raise that?
Yeah, I think that he sort of does address this in a few ways. I think maybe we could see truth first as, having the means to accomplish the action, but also having an action in mind that is, what's the term? Virtuous?
Yeah.
Something that is arrived at through nous rather than through my translation says cleverness is like the bad version of nous.
Okay.
But just doing it for yourself, like, fuck you, got mine attitude.
That's right.
That's the bad one.
Okay, so that's the main point I wanted to get across in this particular paragraph. But if anybody was excited or puzzled by something that was said here, I'm happy to take it up and see what progress we can make. Otherwise, we're going to get to this more general, chapter 3, about the 5 different states in which the soul grasps truth. All right, if nobody has anything else to say about chapter 2, let's look at chapter 3 and see how he draws these distinctions. Let me see. Peter is sharing a screen. Peter, can I share a screen? Thanks. I just, my absurd little drawings. So I drew this, not because I think that you need help to understand this, but rather I wanted to point out a dimension of philosophical method that is, I think, very important, and Aristotle practices this method in really an exemplary fashion. And one of the things that gets burgeoning philosophers in trouble is our definitions. And so people often think in a philosophical dispute that if you just grab a definition that's good for your argument, right, that you've thereby, proved something. And what I want to just point out here is that Aristotle doesn't, even though it sometimes seems like it, he doesn't just grab words off the street and say, well, I like that word, so maybe I'll just use that as the foundation for my theory. He doesn't do that because he's not interested in the fact that it's used, but he's interested in the fact that it's used in a certain way, and that certain way illustrates a prior distinction. So, so if we look at the screen and we see that we have knowledge that's broken down into 2 different subclasses, each subclass being distinct from one another because of the kind of knowledge that's offered there, right? So we have the knowledge that, we discussed those in the beginning of metaphysics, and knowledge why. At the beginning of metaphysics, he said, knowing the why of things is the highest form of knowledge. It's and we know this because if we are given an explanation that answers our question why, we stop asking why. So our behavior shows that there are better and worse answers to our questions. And when we get to the primary or the proper cause, we are like, okay, that's why that happens, or that's why this thing is the way it is. Now, knowledge that and knowledge why, these aren't really names, it's a distinction. And it allows him to distinguish perception, memory, and experience on one hand from scientific knowledge, craft knowledge, practical wisdom, nous, on the other hand. And what I want to point out here, just make the very basic point, is that the things he's interested in get their names as a consequence of the distinction he's drawing. Let's draw the distinction between what cannot be otherwise and what can be otherwise. Okay, and once we've drawn that distinction, then we can start sorting. Kinds of knowledge according to what the kind of things they know are what can be otherwise and what cannot be otherwise. And here it's clear we get a kind of genus species classification system, because through the genus species system, we see both what makes things the same, for instance, knowledge about what cannot be otherwise and what can be otherwise are the same because they're both instances of knowledge why. And so now we know what connects them. But we also now know what distinguishes them. That one is about what cannot be otherwise, and one can be others. And then we get the names, right? Then we say, okay, so I'm going to call episteme, right? I'm going to call scientific knowledge, right? The kind of knowledge that that studies what cannot be otherwise, that doesn't change, and that knows what doesn't change in a very specific way, namely through demonstration. And I'm going to call nous. Nous is my word for the kind of knowledge that knows first principles. First principles never change. So nous belongs into the kind of knowledge about why that has as an object what cannot be otherwise. And so when we name, those names are already embedded in a system of relations of commonality and difference that allows us to, in a structured way, understand their mutual relations, what they include, what they don't include, and further flesh out this system of knowledge that's based on the primary distinction, knowledge that and knowledge why. One might distinguish knowledge otherwise, but that's not what Aristotle is interested in. He's interested in exploring all the implications of a division of knowledge between knowledge that and knowledge why, and then further down between the kind of knowledge that about things that cannot be otherwise and the kind of knowledge that is about things that can be changed or that can be otherwise than they are currently. That is the system of relations he's interested, he's exploring, he's fleshing out. He never says there is only one primary distinction of knowledge. And so he's not shoving this down our throat at all. What he's doing is he's creating the structure of a coherent discourse so we kind of can always know where he's at and why he's making the further distinction that he's making, because we understand the genus, or we understand the family that these different terms are members of. Sandy.
Oh, sorry. I don't want to, I didn't realize you were going to call on me right away. Do
okay.
you want to finish your thing first before?
Oh, yeah. I think I've made my methodological point about how definitions work in philosophy, and that usually we just say, well, I'm going to just define space the way they do in physics or something like that, right? And then you're just assuming that however space is used in physics is somehow normative for all our other discourses, right? And so you grab one use and pretend that you've defined something. And I just kind of wanted to show that definitions follow from distinctions and they don't precede them. And Aristotle does this in a magisterial way, and so it's very nice to notice it once in a while. That's all. So that was the point I wanted to make. I did want to get to the text after your remarks and Tim's.
I just need to see if I'm properly following along. This chart here is really helpful. I personally find Aristotle really hard because it just seems to me that, I mean, this is really my first going into ancient philosophy. So I guess everything I've read is modern, and it just seems like all of these terms coming at once, it's just really overwhelming. It just seems like every other philosopher I've read would spend like at least a chapter on a term, before just it's like, oh my God, it's really like light speed craziness. And so I'm just trying to see if I understand. And I'm a little, so when you say in the knowledge why what can be otherwise, we have techne, which is craft, and phronesis, which is practical wisdom. And I'm just trying to understand when you mean it can be otherwise, you mean like with a craft? Because I was thinking about this. because it's interesting, for example, that with a craft, there can be many different ways to achieve the same effect. And is that part of that? And let me give an example just so that I'm really clear. You know, my husband plays the harp, right? And he had a teacher teach him how to play the harp. So he has, I guess, what you would call a conventional or traditional way of playing that instrument. But he told me that Harpo Marx, who's also a harpist, was self-taught and had his own way of playing the harp, which when he eventually went to go get lessons, the teacher just was like, what? I have no idea what you're doing, but it sounds great. And then they tried to teach him how to do it conventionally. And it was just like, this is not working. Like, just do it in your own intuitive way. But they're both like the same effect is achieved, right? Because you can get music from the instrument. And is that kind of what you mean by it can be otherwise? But it also seems to have like the end kind of has to be the same. Because I mean, if a craft starts veering off too much, it's not going to be the same thing anymore, right? It'll turn into a totally new thing. Maybe this is totally dumb. I'm just trying to see if I understand. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, it is. It's a strange appellation. What can be otherwise? But you know, staying. I mean, just as I think the kind of standard example is like a block of marble can be changed into a statue through the application of a techne, through an art of sculpting. And so, so the block of marble, in one sense, remains a block of marble. In the other sense, it's become something that it wasn't before. It's acquired attributes. Triangles never acquire attributes. We study triangles in geometry, and we find out their necessary properties. And they don't, triangles don't come to be something and then cease being something, but they just always are. But there is in the world of changeable objects, he calls them, he says that there's two kinds of human doing, right? There's producing things and there's acting. Producing things means generating them, which is a change, and studying how to change things engineering would be a great example of a science about changing things, bringing certain things to be, bridges, buildings, the rest of it. So I hope that kind of maps onto what you were thinking about it.
Oh, well, it kind of does. I kind of, when we're always appealing or defining it by the product, right, I'm kind of confused, because isn't this the knowledge of how to make that come into being? Isn't that what the techne or the craft is?
Yeah.
I mean, and obviously it would be completely useless, for example, to know how to build bridges, but never actually, I guess, be able to put that into action. I mean, there would be something missing in that person's life or their definition of a bridge builder if they weren't able to do that. I'm not. I mean, there's a intrinsic relationship there, like you said, to the product or whatever in the craft. But I thought that the technique was the knowledge required in order for that to happen.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So that means that there's just lots of different arts, or lots of different techne, or lots of different crafts. And the idea is that we study in studying carpentry, we're studying a techne. And the idea is that we do certain actions to bring about a product. Did I say carpentry? Yeah, so to bring about a table or a chair. And what makes techne different from phronesis, practical wisdom, is phronesis is not about bringing about an object that is separate and different from the actual action that we're engaged in. So the action itself is the point, not some object that the action is directed to. And then when the object is finished, our activity ceases. We stop doing that because the point was to reach an end, to finish the statue, to build the house. And when the house is built, we stop doing that activity. We stop doing that action. So that's Aristotle's way of saying the point of the action is external to the action. And that's what he calls techne, is the kind of knowledge that allows you to produce external objects. And phronesis is the kind of knowledge that allows you to produce good actions, so to speak, which we don't really produce because they're not separable. Yeah, okay. So
just an example, can I just have an example of the phronesis, the practical wisdom? Because that one is not as clear to me. Techne, I think, is really easy to get for all of us have achieved some level of that, but maybe not all of us have even gotten this far with phronesis. So I'm trying to understand what it is.
Right, and I think we're gonna read part of that section here, and then, but before we do that, I did want to hit a couple other hands up, and I'm going to try not to answer too extensively because otherwise we'll never make it. But that's the way it is. These discussion groups are great because of participation, so that's not a critique. Let me see. I saw Tim first, I believe, then Nick, and then yeah, I'm not sure who came after that. So maybe you guys can settle amongst each other. Tim.
Yeah, I don't know if this is worth saying or not, but I noticed that like what cannot be otherwise is actually named by Sophia, right? So this is kind of a back of the napkin graph, but really Sophia is not under episteme and nous. It's actually, it is the name of what cannot be otherwise, correct?
No, the reason why I drew it that way is because Sophia is really just a combination of episteme and nous. You can have epistemic knowledge and just by demonstrating, but you don't know the source of the principles that you use to demonstrate from. Well, and you can know first principles, but not demonstrate anything from them. And then you would have nous, but you wouldn't have episteme. But so to speak, the ideal of having episteme and having nous is having both, and that's what he calls Sophia.
Okay, I'll go with that. And then also I wondered if praxis could be the equivalent, the counterpart to what can be otherwise, the counterpart of Sophia. So praxis would be something like mastery that demonstrates ends.
Right. I would say that phronesis is the knowledge of praxis, and praxis is his term for action. And so praxis is different than producing, because praxis has its end in itself. Something that we do just because it's good to do, and not because there's some end outside of it that once we attain it, we would stop doing that thing.
I see. So you're saying that praxis is synonymous with phronesis?
So phronesis is the knowledge of praxis. So its object and praxis, there's lots of different praxes, and they can be otherwise. They're not eternal verities. So that phronesis would be the knowledge of good praxis.
Okay, I'll leave it at that just to not prolong it, but it just seems like Sophia has the same problem. But anyway, we'll move on. That's fine.
Okay, let me see. Sorry, who was next? Nick.
Yeah, can you hear me, or am I still on mute? Oh, okay.
I can hear you.
You can hear us. Yeah, I thought I was on mute. So I just wanted to kind of overlay theoretical thinking versus practical thinking on this chart of yours. So it seems like then the implication here is theoretical thinking is on the left-hand side of this knowledge Y. And it because it's about what cannot be otherwise. Theoretical thinking has to deal only with necessary and universal stuff.
Right.
I think it's its implication, and I'm not too sure too on is practical thinking. Does it is it exactly what is on the right hand side? Everything that is contingent, i.e., it includes not only action, phronesis, but also craft production, or poesis, essentially.
Yeah.
That is all practical
Yes.
thinking. Okay, but
Right.
and practical thinking is always essentially about contingent stuff, about things that may or may not be, so forth. This is the way they think about it.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, no, I think it's got, all I wanted to say, Aristotle doesn't give us the word theoria in this breakdown, and it might have to do with the fact that theoria, or theoretical truths, that they are both on the techne, in the practical side, and in the epistemic side, or what the study of what cannot be otherwise. And so theoria is not listed here because its status cuts across these distinctions.
Yeah, so actually that's a good point, because my translation doesn't use practical or theoretical. It uses thought concerned with study and thought concerned with action. And those are the, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
pretty good.
All right, thanks.
So we're gonna
Thanks.
study,
Yeah.
yeah, but
This is the Terence Irwin
okay.
translation. Yeah.
That's one of those things that it isn't immediately plausible that this is a distinction of a genus, right? Knowledge of study and knowledge of, what was the other one? I don't know. I just that kind of translation makes it seems like he's contrasting two completely unrelated things, whereas my little diagram shows that he's contrasting two very specifically related things, namely knowledge of why. Okay, I got a couple hands, and I did see another hand, but they dropped out. But I hope you can still, I think it was Shelley who had her hand up, but I'm not quite sure who's next. I think it might be Tom.
Okay, thank you. I'm just gonna respond to what Sandy asked earlier, and this is my comment to Sandy. Maybe it's correct, maybe it is not, but this is my interpretation. And I think that when you're talking about knowledge of why, the two distinctions here about what cannot be otherwise is, in a sense, metaphysically what it is, as in the nature of the universe and so on. And the what can be otherwise are those subject to human choice. So you can talk about, why are there only 50 states in the United States? And well, that's a matter of human choice from the past, that they did this and this. And was that a good decision or not, one way or the other? That's phronesis.
Right.
And if not, it isn't. But that's what human choice will give us. And we want to know why about that too. That's it.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Thanks. Let me see. Shelley, I think you've been waiting for, do you mind, or do you want to wait a little bit?
Hi, y'all. Nice to be here. What an really enjoying this. This is just so fascinating to me. I have my question is, what is the point here with Aristotle and the Greeks? Is there an aim at what they're trying to get at? I mean, is this religious? Is it? I don't know if this is talking about religion.
I see. Okay.
But yeah, that's my first question. You want to? And then the other one is just the soul. My interpretation of a soul is eternal. That time is, I don't want to say linear because I don't know what that means, but it doesn't really quite exist. I mean, there is no death, and that this, because we've incarnated into many, 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 many bodies within a single lifetime. We can look and try to find our 21-year-old body all day, and you're not going to find it. You know, and that just reinforces to me what is eternal, what is ever change, what is the soul. But what I think, and if this is not your jam, anybody, you know, like about bringing God into it, because I realize God has a lot of baggage equated into that, and so does the word forgiveness, that has a lot of baggage. But my take on it, and it's also something I've been studying, which runs so parallel to this, it's amazing. That's why I'm wondering, this is physics, science, philosophy. It's just very cool, because what it's saying is God. Okay, don't mean to turn anybody off with that word. You could substitute it with / love, light, wholeness, wellness. Well, love, what is all encompassing, can have no opposite. So the opposite of love is fear, but what is all encompassing doesn't have an opposite. So
Yeah.
therefore fear is just an illusion and doesn't even exist at all.
Right.
It exists in our egos that perceive, but God is knowledge. God didn't make perception. He doesn't know perception. Perception is judgment. It's sending attack thoughts. What you think, you create. So when you're judging, it's coming back on you. And if you want inner peace, you know that we're all interconnected. What flows through me flows through the tree, through my dog, and all around. That underneath many layers is the soul of everyone, and it's universe, one song, one humanity. So I'm just saying that that's kind of my take, and this is running so parallel to the ego during the separation. The ego knows judgment. God did not create judgment because he doesn't know judgment. They will never coexist together, ever, because they're completely separate.
So Shelley, I think that there's a lot of Greek thought in what you're saying, and some stuff that comes later in history, so there's a lot I'd like to agree with, but it is a whole. You just gave us a whole system of metaphysics in 2 paragraphs, which is very exciting and has a lot of elements from Aristotle and from later Greeks and from the Christian tradition and perhaps from Eastern traditions. I'm feeling there's a lot there. So I'm anxious to hear in the course of studying Aristotle, right? How you think about that metaphysical system that you just presented. You know, what changes, right? Because Aristotle is going to be very strict with us when we're talking about things, what he calls homonymously, like we use we use the same word, but they mean different things. So I think that, for instance, your word soul and his word soul function very differently, and they mean very different things. And I'm just, hopefully by the end of this, you'll understand why and what necessitates using the word soul like this. It's not because he's religious, and he's not because he just adheres to a tradition or is particularly attracted to a certain set of attitudes, but it's really, trying to think the truth of what is, and that will bring him to a place where he must speak about soul and i.e. life, and intellect, i.e. spirit. So yeah, that's the point. That's the way I'm teaching this. You can go a lot of different routes with Aristotle. As you can tell, that the texts are very complex, and there's lots of different lines you can draw through in order to make sense of it. I'm doing this one that leads to what Greek thinkers who were not Christians, who were not based in any revealed religion, who were very skeptical of the myths that circulated in their culture. Why, and it wasn't just pious hope, but why did they introduce, in a logically rigorous sense, to think about nature, to think about knowledge? Why did they introduce, in a rigorous sense, terms like spirit and soul? So that's my goal, is to embed these terms into a rich logical framework to see how these terms got their sense. And then they were borrowed in the Christian tradition and altered and changed, sometimes for interesting reasons, sometimes for not so interesting reasons. But this would be at least a key to understanding the history of how soul and spirit got handed down to us in the let me say, misty and esoteric forms in which they're used in the 20th and 21st century. So anyway, thank you. I hope that kind of addressed your question. I got Clark next, and then Garth.
Yeah, appreciate your answer to Shelley. My question is, I'm still struggling, even though everybody that's asked questions has helped me out a bit, how it is that what cannot be otherwise is not under the column of knowledge that. It seems to me if it cannot be otherwise, even if I have to go through a different procedure, perhaps, I mean, there has to be demonstrations, or I start from first principles. Isn't that a technicality? Because It's still what cannot be otherwise. So shouldn't that be knowledge that? It can't be otherwise. It's knowledge that. It's immediate. It's there. Maybe I have to dig the hole deeper, but it still cannot be otherwise. And that's the same as knowledge that, experience, memory, perception. Isn't that what knowledge
like
that is?
the so what cannot be otherwise doesn't refer to the knowledge, but what the knowledge is of. All right. So so scientific knowledge is about things that never change, but that always are. And our scientific knowledge will itself change as we come to a better understanding of things that never change. You know, for him, for instance, the orbits of the planets is one of those things that that cannot be otherwise. And so the study of that is we use episteme and demonstration to study the orbit of stars, or orbit of planets and stars, because of their circular motion, which is an eternal motion. So perception is always of, well, perception is very interesting, but perception, memory, experience, and we can ask what are the objects that correspond to these things? And what kind of knowledge, what's perception of? Well, perception is knowledge of a state I happen to be in right now. I don't know if what I'm perceiving really is the way it seems to be, right? So I just know that right now Socrates is pale, right? I perceive Socrates as pale, but knowing that he's pale doesn't tell me why he's pale. And so his paleness is a mystery. And so Aristotle's pointing out, and he points out in the beginning of the Metaphysics, that knowledge, there are different states of knowledge, and that they have a hierarchical ordering such that there is a highest or a best kind of knowledge. And what he thinks is the best kind of knowledge is the knowledge of why, which he says is the knowledge of causes. So perception, memory, experience, these don't tell us the why of anything. And so they're at best the raw material for a higher kind of knowledge, namely knowing the causes, knowing why. Why is Socrates pale? It tells us not only that he is, but then we understand more than just his paleness. We've been able to situate him into a cognitive context that that is illuminating not of his being pale, but of other people being pale and of other people turning dark, and so it yields much more knowledge. So that's kind of my answer to that. It's
I appreciate that. I'm trying to just imprint theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge, and I was trying to think that knowledge that was trying to be theoretical knowledge.
Right, and you know, he's not, so theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge is not the way he makes this distinction. And so I would urge us not to try to force our understanding of the difference between theoretical and practical onto this distinction, but rather let's start talking about like Aristotle does to understand him better. Garth.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Sophia a little bit, so it's sort of good that you guys were talking about it just before me. Are you saying under theoretical wisdom, what is that word before prior?
Oh, demonstrates from first principles.
Oh, demonstrates from.
Yeah, sorry.
I think maybe that's not quite correct, because it seems Aristotle is saying that these first principles cannot be demonstrated, that they are something that you arrive at perhaps with great difficulty after considering many possibilities.
Yes.
And because for example, in his principle of non-contradiction, I read that section for fun because it's great. And he has all these arguments about basically, if you don't accept a first principle, you end up with absurd results. And in the case of the principle of non-contradiction, you can't act at all. Every action is in conformity with the principle of non-contradiction, which is why he says only a plant can truly not accept the principle of non-contradiction. So anyway, I don't know if that helps.
That's interesting. I love it. I'm not gonna like Tim said. This is kitchen napkin stuff here, but what I wanted to say about Sophia is the person with that has this theoretical wisdom is one who knows how to attain the first principles from which he or she knows how to correctly demonstrate what follows from those principles in a scientific demonstration, right? So,
I get what you're saying. I get what you wrote now. Basically, the theoretical wisdom are demonstrated from the first principle. So it's not necessarily the first principle itself.
Right. And so, yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. Charlie.
Theoretical wisdom.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I didn't unmute. Responding to Clark's question.
Oh, great.
I don't know if this helps, or how it strikes me is the knowledge that the perception, memory, and experience, those are just stuff that you have. You get, you can't really avoid it. I mean, you do perceive things, and things are banked in your memory, and you have this experience, and those things are present there. But then the difference is when you go to knowledge why, that's where you deliberate and where you reason and where you try to come to some kind of meaning and some kind of bottom explanation or starting point, as Aristotle would say. That's where you'd come to a starting point from where all this knowledge that comes from. And so the knowledge why kind of takes work to get down to the first principles and find them and to understand them and to see what they are and to work around them. And the knowledge that would be actually the place where you start, because you have this content, but then you wonder about the content. As he said in the very beginning, everybody wonders, everybody wants to know why. And that's would be the difference, why you have the first principles that are the starting points and the things beyond which you cannot go. But you need to work with the knowledge that in order to get to them and in order to find them.
Right. Yeah, so if I see a plane drop out of the sky, I know that a plane drops out of the sky, but I don't know why. And so I need to go beyond the perception. And indeed, I need to understand certain methods of inquiry, right? I need to look at the newspapers, and I might need to maybe understand physics a little bit better about why things fall out of the sky, right? And so all of this thinking about how to understand the plane falling out of the sky itself none of this stuff comes out of any perception, any memory, any experience, right? And so, I don't
understand that.
And so in a sense, he's helping us, he's articulating, right, what the mind, to use a non-Greek term, right, has to bring forth from itself in order to go from knowledge that to knowledge why. And all of these different episteme, nous, techne, phronesis, Sophia, these are all this is all like putting his finger on different cognitive methods that every one of us has at their disposal.
That would be the other way around. Why that?
Pardon me?
No. Oh, I didn't know I was on.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah. I thought it might be a question. Yeah, so he's bringing it to light, the entire apparatus of knowledge that we unconsciously use all the time, depending on whether we're looking at things, mathematical objects, or we're trying to perform moral actions, or we're trying to build something. Each one of these activates a particular disposition to know in each one of us. And Aristotle is putting his finger on them and showing that each one has a very specific contour, and therefore each one has a very specific goal, and each one is very specific for the sake of which. And becoming conscious of these things, for instance, shows us why we shouldn't try to think and know epistemically when we're trying to carry out a good action. It's the wrong kind of knowledge. Yeah, so so he's bringing this whole web of distinctions in order to show, you know, what both what nous or mind or the thinking faculty has it from itself that is always orienting us in our various cognitive endeavors, but also by showing the different kinds of knowledge. He's also showing that if you try to do a specific task according to the wrong kind of knowledge, you are going to do it poorly. Right? You're not going to achieve any reliable results. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So it's already 5:30, and so we should probably get to a little bit to the text, but I would like to just hear people chime in. I'm going to try to restrict this to 5 minutes. We have a choice of going through this text fast, or maybe taking only selections from it and going through it slowly. And the discussion is really, I find it very stimulating and very, very helpful. And so I like the discussions, and I don't want to minimize them. I don't want to lecture and just, I don't want it to be like that. But we are already up to almost up to our 8-week point, and we haven't traversed much text. And I just would like to just right now momentarily stop and hear if anybody has any opinions about, how urgent is it to get through this fast, or is a slow pace working for you? And if not, how you'd like to see this. So does anybody have an opinion on this? I definitely would. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's better than, the pace is better than it was in categories. I mean, we were definitely going too slow, I think, at first, but I think this is fine, personally.
Oh, thank you. Sandy.
I just need a lot of help at the beginning here. I'm not going to rule out the possibility that we couldn't pick up the pace at some point, but I'm sorry. I feel like I'm contributing to bogging down the discussion, but I feel like this is whitewater rafting, and I'm a total amateur who's never done it before, so I'm scared. I need to be guided. So
no, that's good. So you're recommending that a slower pace with more thorough audience or participation and discussion is a better format for you?
Right now, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Because this is all new to me. So I know I did the Schmidt book and everything, but this is, we have to get used. It's not just about getting used to the terms and the way they're thinking, but there's also just, in this case, we're reading a whole bunch of different texts at once, and sometimes the terms are popping up in different texts, and so I don't even know in my head, like, wait a minute, like, wait, where did that one, it's like I'll know the term or what he's talking about, but I'm not even able to remember where it appeared, so just that formatting alone requires more time for me personally than if we had a book where we were all literally on the same page all the time and following it chapter by chapter. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's just, to me, adding a little bit to the challenge. But so that's just why I feel the way I do about it.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And Aristotle is brutally hard. So there's that. And that's why I A, like the slower pace, and B, like the fullness of the discussions. But I'm going to hear a couple other voices. I saw Tim, Clark, Mike, Garth. So Tim first.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really strong on it, but I would would prefer to do a little bit more text. I mean, if we had,
right.
If we had half of it actually discussing the text, and then the other half fielding questions, and somehow have just some kind of an artificial or arbitrary cutoff for hands being raised, and we could, and I do get value out of that, but I don't know. I just felt like today we didn't spend a whole lot of time in the text, and really the last few sessions we haven't. So I would like to see a little more progress with the text, but I'm not really hard.
I want to hear what people have to say. I want to hear what people have to say, because everybody's got different needs, but what works best for them. And this seminar is finding its feet right now. So I appreciate that. Let me see. I don't remember the order I just indicated before, but I think it was Clark, then Mike, then Garth, and now Nick and Sagnick. So Mike, I think you're next.
I think if we were to go through this quicker, personally, I don't think I would benefit as much. I do sort of see or understand what you want to gain from your project, Michael. And I see with Aristotle, it's kind of undoing I guess the thinking of modernism and empiricism, and thinking that this is how we think. And this is sort of going back to the ancients and trying to undo that. And maybe in the end, I'll still find, no, I want to be an empiricist, right? But at least I have this framework. And if we were to do this more quickly, for me at least, my pace, I wouldn't get a sufficient undoing of that and really experiencing. It would be more just like a historical survey of some of his experience. But to really sort of understand, like, why the heck is he talking about kinds of, and what could be otherwise, like that. Initially, I think that's very a tortured way of speaking, but I do see that he's really trying. It predates my my conventional way of thinking, and I think there's something to be said. So I'm thinking, go at this pace or even slower for me.
Right.
Just to really grok this, but I like this, and I do like the discussion because it does help me too.
Well, thanks for that, Mike. No, I like the fact that everybody's been totally dialed in and on point, and that's why the discussions have been very rich, is because everybody's really grappling with the Aristotelian text as they've read them, even though we don't necessarily discuss them all. But yeah, so that's why I've been very excited about the discussion. But I understand that it might get to be too much. I'm hearing thus far, slow is okay, maybe fewer texts, and then just really dive into the details of those texts and let the discussion unfold and not try to do everything. Maybe, yeah, okay, anyway, so I got a couple other hands. I just wanted to let you know what's resonating and what I'm hearing. I think Clark's next.
Yeah. Hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just so I can go, I usually learn things by kind of getting inspired, and then I get intuitions, and then I can speed along. With this, it's repetition, repetition, repetition. So I don't have a strong feeling strategy one way or the other. We can go with the words, we can go with the discussion, but I just humbly notice in myself that I've got to hear it 4 times. I mean, you've worked hard saying the same thing 3 times already today. One was in response to one of my, in a way. And to get it through my noggin, I just have to hear it over and over, because it's really it's so close to how I think that it makes it harder to understand without really paying attention. And I just have to hear it over and over.
I think that's very wise. Philosophy has a lot to do with repetition and just hammering the stuff in your head and grasping the relations, and then all of a sudden you have your aha moments where everything comes together. But you got to kind of dig in and get muddy and get a lot of balls juggling in the air before it comes together. Let me see. I saw Nick, Garth, then Sagnick, and Bo.
I guess my input is, I guess we can go up. It's pretty effective so far. First, I have to say, because as far as learning and picking up stuff, I guess my preference, and not a strong one, is just I would close reading, just close reading essentially. I think I'd have a hard time reading Aristotle by myself. I'd get bored or whatever. But so I come to this group so that we can close read together. And so there are some passages that are key passages. If you point them out, and then we can hover over that to everybody's benefit, that would be great. And then there are hard passages as well that are confusing. And those also, if you can hover over those. But I think for me, again, it's close reading. I mean, some of us are more advanced, of course. Some of us have already read this stuff and they're ready to critique and do a meta discussion. I think most of us are in the point of, we just want to grasp what Aristotle's saying. And I think if we get a chance to read this again, then we can go beyond that. But right now, it just get me through it. Understand it. Okay. Yeah.
Beautifully said, right? Kalon, that's really nice. Thank you. That I agree. I like that. Garth.
I was going to say, like, I think that some other parts of like the ethics and physics and prior analytics, posterior analytics are worth reading. And if you don't understand this, maybe just try to read some of that in your spare time. Like you can read some other sections of the ethics. Like you could start at the beginning and sort of get Aristotle's method here, because I think a lot of the problems we had, for example, with like phronesis versus techne, I think Aristotle sort of addresses that in his beginning when he talks about happiness. And if you're having a hard time, maybe try doing that. I think the physics is really a cool book and I loved reading it. And, you know, before I read it, I got all this junk from people saying how Aristotle says like all these things that aren't true in the physics, but I didn't see any of that. And I know I love Aristotle. I don't see why it's so hard for everyone, but anyway.
Well, anybody? Okay. Yeah. Awesome. I've read Aristotle a number of times and it's really hard. So it's just, I guess it's just what you cotton to most. Sagnik.
Yeah, so I think I'd love to have a slower discussion like we're having right now, but also like, you know, I'd love if we have get a chance to have a detailed and close reading of the text. I won't benefit much from a faster pace basically, but that depends completely on you. I mean, if you want to finish it within next 2 or 3 weeks, then I don't know. I mean, or if we can stretch a few weeks further, then like, you know, it's great.
Beautiful. Thanks for your input. I appreciate it. Nothing's going to be done in 2 weeks. I can tell you that much right now. Bo.
I would first of all like to heartily second Clark's comments. I think this material is so complicated and I find myself having to unwind everything I thought I knew about knowledge, truth. And so I second him. And I also want to thank you, Michael, I love it when you do these materials like the thing you were sharing. I love it. It really helps.
Okay, that's awesome. Thanks.
I find the first reading of Aristotle is just sort of like taking a grinder to my mind. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I see that, but oh my God. And it really helps to have what you did. So I want to encourage you to keep doing that because I just really appreciate it. And I screenshot it myself.
Fabulous. Okay, no, thanks very much for your input. So what I'm going to try to do is just assign like 2 or 3 pages, and we're just 2 or 3 pages, and then see how long it takes us to work through it. The problem is, yeah, okay, good. So we'll do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to assign what we were supposed to have talked about today. So I think that we're going to use the last 15 minutes to talk about any lingering issues that popped up in your reading of the Nicomachean Ethics about the different kinds of knowledge. because I don't think we have a chance to get past that. But what I really would like to do next time is focus on a very little text, and it's going to be what Aristotle has to say about material cause, and then his critique of material cause. So that's going to be a little bit from book 1, chapter 3, and book 1, chapter 8. Okay, so we're going to focus on material cause, and then and just hit that. And we're probably going to have time to hit efficient cause, because he doesn't talk about them that much. And that will be our session, however long it lasts next week. We'll just focus on those two things. I'll put the reading up on the website, and then just ask you to we'll really dig into the details, because I think they're incredibly important for thinking about what kind of knowledge is metaphysical knowledge, and how he thinks about these material causes and the way he does it, and will clue us in on that. Sandy, I see your hand.
I just wanted to be a voice of hope for people like Tim or Garth who've have a little bit more experience or want to go faster. So I think this is like an uphill downhill kind of thing. I do think that because we have a group of people here, I tend to see most of the same people returning. I think most of us are dedicated to understanding at some point, and I do think we will get it at some point. It won't be as hard eventually, and we will be able to pick up the pace. I really, that's also, I'm speaking from experience there as well with other books that I've read, but it's good that we have such a solid group of people, because I know at least from my group at the beginning, aside from you Portland people, it was kind of weird. There were people dropping in and out all the time. It was hard to get to know like who's like, you didn't hear as many voices. It was crazy. And this group, this is why I guess I really appreciate the discussion, because it's hard when it's like, anybody want to read, and it's like crickets and you're just kind of there. Because we could all be that way. Trust me, we're intimidated by this stuff. Like, we are speaking up out of desperation, at least I am, because we're trying to understand, so I think we will be able to pick up the pace. I'm just saying, for us gutter balls here, I think we will get further and be able to go. So, for Tim and the other people, just give us some time. And we will be able, to pick up the pace. Because you guys know me, I don't like going slow, but so I'm doing it out of absolute necessity here. Like, I want to pick up the pace. I'm looking forward to that moment, right? So that's all I just wanted to add.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Tim.
Well, my name came up twice there, and I just want to say, no, I am definitely not experienced with Aristotle. But what I do like is learning Aristotle through his text.
Yeah.
The close reading that Nick recommended is exactly like what would be my preference. And we do that with Hegel. We do a very close reading. It is slow, but it's on the text. It's hovering over the text, just like every little word. And I feel like this group is, even though I agree with Bo that these graphs are good and they're helpful, but what I'm seeing is that we're spending most of the session covering the graphs, and that may be good, but it's not the text. And that's where I'm just recommending a close, even slow reading of the text. But that's just my preference. It doesn't mean we have to do it that way. But I just want to disclaim any knowledge and expertise in Aristotle, because I certainly don't have it.
I agree. I think that's great. I'm glad that people generally go slow. I'm glad that people generally want to focus on the text. And I think I'm emotionally ready now to focus more on the text, because we have a solid group of 20 people that are just always showing up, and there's very little variation now. And so I don't feel like I have to perform acts of gymnastics to keep people interested. But it was very important for me in the first several sessions to keep repeating this Parmenidean ascent thing, because it does structure what text I choose and what I emphasize. but I think since everybody's heard the spiel now a couple times, I can drop it, and I can be more focused on text from here on out, because I got a committed group here who doesn't mind going slow and working through things thoroughly, because that's the only way to do philosophy, in my opinion. Garth.
I sort of feel like if we do things very slowly and we simply repeat ourselves, we might be sort of like spinning our wheels without accomplishing much. Like there's a big difference in the outcomes that you can realize through more or less effective teaching methods. And I just wonder how effective the teaching method is when we basically are just sitting there and repeating something from the text over and over again. I just think we need to be able to bring in more variety of sources or something to help overcome this. I mean, maybe Schmidt actually addresses some of the questions that we're looking at in his book, or maybe we could look on SEP and read parts of the SEP entry. I don't know, but I just feel like I've understood more. Maybe you don't think I understand anything, that's fine. But I've understood more by using a variety of sources rather than just reading the same passages of Aristotle over and over again. I mean, I feel like I understand some of this better because I've read other things in Aristotle.
Right.
And that's just sort of my feeling.
No, I appreciate that. And if you feel like we're getting into a, miring ourselves going over the same text over and over and over again, pipe up and let us, or let me, or send me a message or something like that it's going too slow. I agree with you. We don't want to thrash through these things forever. We want to make some progress. So we just got to give it a try. All right, we are going to give it a try as a group. We're going to focus on material causes and efficient causes and nothing else next time. Be very text focused, minimal graphics, and maybe only at the end as a cocktail and something to relax to, and and then see how that works for a couple sessions. Mike.
No offense, Tim, but maybe a counterpoint to your comment about the graphics. I actually really like the graphics and the other the chart you made with the 4 boxes with the different.
Oh, right, for the categories.
Yeah, because I find in the text he has these ideas and these notions that refer back to each other, and there are all these different things like this is something that could be otherwise, this isn't, and then to see that on a graph and how it's connected does help me. Whereas when I'm going through the text linearly, I lose those connections. Right. So I did what Bo did, and I took a screenshot of your diagram. And for me, that helps a lot, but I'm definitely open to a median, because if that does take us away from the text, like, I'm totally open to that. But I do like the graphs as well. So maybe there's some.
Right. So maybe in the future we just I do the graph in the context of reading a text rather than starting with a diagram. So we read the text and then if it seems like people are floundering, throw a diagram up there and see if it helps. So they're supposed to be aids and not the main thing. And so I appreciate Tim's comment. Yeah, but but today's conversation I thought was really good about the diagram. It went way beyond the simple stuff I put up there, right? Because it was informed by people's reading, and so that added that enriched the discussion. So Philip.
Yeah, I would welcome like a guided way to have to work with the material, like you did that one time when you said, well, what are the conditions for knowing? Because it actually I engage more with the material, less passively.
I see. Okay. Well, I mean, does it help, for instance? I mean, is it helpful for you personally?
Well, it certainly helps for me personally, and I'm not suggesting we go through all 20 people answering, but
No, but I want to know is, if I say next time we're going to focus on material causes and efficient causes and what they are and what the critique is. I mean, is that kind of the kind of guidance you're thinking about, or are you thinking about something else? I mean, I've got my overarching theme that's directing us to the soul, yes, but I don't want to rehearse that every time. But yeah, I don't know if giving a specific topic that we're going to discuss next time, if that's the kind of thing that helps direct your reading.
That specific topic does help, but I'm thinking more. Michael, I'll email you. I'm not able to phrase it very well right now.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. But can I just say that, I've done a lot of philosophy, and still during the week preparing for this, I'm mostly in a state of absolute despair about what the hell is going on in this text. Oh, so yeah, so
I want to add one other thing. Feel free to, when you create these things, to maybe put them up for download on the meetup site too.
yeah, that might be the best place. And then if somebody finds them helpful, we can pop it up. But if there's no interest, then we don't have to do
Also,
that.
I think we're floundering because we're getting our sea legs in Aristotle, and
Yes.
as we get better, we're gonna be faster and better. So done.
No, I don't think we're ever going to be faster. I think what I need to do is I just need to be very selective about what I assign, and then let us do those things really intensely. For instance, I should not have assigned chapter 9 of the first book with the critique of Platonic. I mean, that is in a completely insane chapter. I mean, nobody knows what's happening in that chapter. Right, so it's diminishing returns trying to work through a chapter like that, especially our first time through. We can skip it without any injury to our understanding. So I need to be a little bit more judicious about what I assign, and that way we can really dig into it, and hopefully not find ourselves dealing with some that like that. And every time Aristotle brings up Plato, the text just goes haywire. It's so weird in the ethics and everything. It just goes like, whoa, what in the heck is going on? Tyler.
Yeah, I was going to mention that about Plato, but also you could start to read certain sections, and initially you're like, I get this. And then as you get through, and you're like, no, I don't get this anymore. So like it can be deceptively, because he introduces, these simple categories in this very dry analytic way at first. What you can be prone to doing is thinking that you can roughly estimate how this relates to the words you already know and how they fit together. Right. But then the further you go in, the more careful you have to be not to do that. Otherwise, you're just going to come off entirely confused in a bad way without realizing how confused you are in the good way.
Yeah, I mean, if it's any consolation, I mean, it's just everybody who studied philosophy or even the sciences for thousands of years basically broke their noggin on these texts or commentaries on these texts or similar texts. And so it's really, it is, I always like to say Kant is boot camp, but Aristotle is a real boot camp. And you don't know why you're doing all of these very painful exercises in boot camp. They're for something else. And we are going to attain insights, and we're going to gain familiarity with concepts that we see bouncing around the literature all over the place, and we don't know why they're popping up. And they're usually the dry, boring sections in academic texts that we skip over, looking for the meat. And hopefully, by struggling through Aristotle, you're going to find out that the meat is precisely the stuff that you've been skipping over. And yeah, with Aristotle, that's the other thing. It's like everything makes complete and total sense, and it's like total obvious, and then it's like you take one further step, and then you've fallen into a cavern, and it feels like you're never ever going to hit land again. And then you struggle through that, and then all of a sudden you're on like easy terrain again, and you don't know how this, this opening up of the fourth dimension happened in the middle of a sentence. Yeah, that's our experience with this text. Yeah, Nick, you're muted.
Sorry, it's like I've never used this before. So, what is your plan, Michael, as far as time frame?
Yeah.
Are we going to try to finish the metaphysics, and if so, how many years is your plan for us?
I am going to skip. I'm going to skip a couple some stuff, and I'm just going to go to the ones. I'm going to skip some. So we will probably skip about half of it by the time we get through.
Okay.
So,
but you also. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
You also mentioned that you were going to break things into 8 weeks break, and then 8 weeks. Are you going to do that, or are we just going to keep going? You were going to take a 4
I know,
break?
I know. I'm on the fence about that. I mean, personally, if we continue on a weekly basis, I need to take a break because I basically don't do anything but Aristotle anymore. And as enriching as that is, it's sometimes frustrating, but it takes a lot of prep for me, which is fine. That's why I'm doing it. I want to do the work.
You need a TA assistant like Peter, maybe. Peter can
there's like half of people here are people who keep me on my toes with respect to Aristotle and Kant and Hegel and all the rest. So yeah. Okay. Sorry, I guess we're just going to do logistics today. Does everybody like the weekly pace, or is it too much for you?
Weekly's fine.
We could definitely use breaks, but yeah, weekly is okay.
Yeah, with some breaks will be good. But I think next question is really like, are we going to finish Aristotle by the end of the year, or by the end of next year, or by the end of the decade?
By the end of this year. No, it's got to be by the end. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. It's kind of up to how intense our discussions are.
Yeah, right? Because we wanted to go up to Boethius, I thought, or even further. I thought,
yeah,
right?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a big project.
I know.
But yeah, I mean, okay. First of all, but second of all, nothing's going to be as hard as this. But believe me, if we started with Plotinus, you'd be having the same kind of, oh my God, what in the hell is happening here? But reading Plotinus against the background of Aristotle, he's like, yeah, of course, duh. So you got to start somewhere, and it's best to start at the beginning. And
but then you'd want us to read Plato to read Plotinus, actually, as a background.
In this unit, I'm basically not going to do Plato.
Okay.
Look, I guess what I want to do, I want to see this on the text focus that we're going to do for the next several sessions. Right? How far do we get? Okay. If we're making pretty good progress, then I can say, okay, let's just keep up. Let's keep doing it this way. At this pace, we'll be done by the metaphysics by the summer, and then with a couple breaks interspersed, so that we can then hit Plotinus and do Plotinus for the rest of the year. Is that to get through Aristotle and Plotinus is definitely going to be your 2021 project. 2022 is going to start with Augustine and Boethius, and onward.
Wow.
So
it's going to be a long friendship here. A long journey.
That's okay. You know, it's study amongst friends. Yeah. So that's why I'm so pleased at how this group has coalesced so quickly into a really productive work community. Yeah. Sandy.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I'm actually glad that Tim said doing lesser texts and focusing on them more, because I really did get swamped with all the texts at once and wasn't really able to finish. And that's not really my style. I mean, I'm not a slacker by any means, but it was just really, really hard for me for various reasons that I already stated.
Right.
And I do think, and I mean, this is just from the way I've done philosophy also in the past, or any book that I studied, even if it was a work of fiction, there's just a moment where you kind of all be like, yeah, okay, we got it. Even if you didn't totally, and start moving forward, you can always go back and enrich that basic understanding, and so that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to get to. And I think if we do the smaller amount of text, we can do that, because I do think these texts are really rich. So I don't think it will be a waste of time to not, you know what I mean? And I actually think if we did it with that, and then had your charts and stuff to kind of zoom out, onto the big picture, and then go back to the small text, it would be a nice way to just kind of show us sort of where we're headed without like completely looking over the edge and terrifying us to see, you know what I mean? Because they're just, that's just how it feels for me. So I do feel confident that we can get to that point. I really feel confident. And I do have to say that I had this nagging thing all along where I felt it would be easier maybe if we went to the medievals first and then went back to the ancients and Aristotle, because maybe I thought it would I'm a little bit more familiar with medieval just through art and, you know, various things. And at least for me personally, but, you know, also maybe just in terms of the way everything went chronologically. And I saw somebody in the chat said reading Aquinas's commentaries on Aristotle is really helpful. And I mean, I totally get that. But at the same time, I also, okay, Nick has it too. Okay, maybe I do need to get this. Okay, because I was gonna be like, you guys are throwing more books at me, and I'm just like, no, that's my immediate reaction. I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. But if you're saying I need to, then I will. Okay,
but it's exactly what you want. You want to go to medieval and Aristotle.
Yeah, okay. I mean, if that's what you're saying I should do, okay, maybe that will be the key for me then. Okay, because normally I hate the idea of reading more than I have to. I'm actually kind of lazy about it. As much as I love books and reading, I get really scared about the idea. Like for example, I usually totally skip introductions when I read a book. I totally skip forewords and all that stuff because I'm just like, oh my God, why do I want to see this if this is just gonna be even more crap that I have to, you know, on top of the other crap I'm supposed to be doing. And I know that's a bad way to think about it, but okay. I'm gonna get the Aquinas commentary then. I just don't, is that good though? Because what if like some of us from the group are reading the Aquinas commentary and then we're getting more ahead and then the others are behind? No, you think it's okay? You think okay?
No, Aquinas doesn't make it easier. So don't worry about that.
Okay.
It's not like you're going to skyrocket in front of everybody riding the Aquinas surfboard or anything. No.
Right. But it's one genius making commentary on another genius. So you've got that double problem.
Right. That's right. So, sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not. And but when it's helpful, it's very helpful. So
okay.
Yeah.
And
right,
by the way,
Sandy, Italian, you know, the holiday there with Thomas Aquinas to get me into the hard Greek terrain.
Sandy, you know that Aquinas called everything that he wrote straw, so you're allowed to call it crap.
Okay. I mean, I was just being, you know, facetious because I was a bad student. I get easily distracted and like so sometimes that just comes out in me. And when I start to get struggle, you know, sometimes it really comes out. But I mean, I'm really enjoying it. I'm really looking forward, like I said, but I do definitely feel like really overwhelmed at this point and just trying to orient myself. But I mean, just one more thing, Michael, I do think you can drop the whole permittity as an assent thing and we can just start focusing on the text because like I said, we do have the solid group of people now and I just don't, you know, it'll come up again because this is the whole purpose why you're bringing us here. So it's not like it's not relevant still. It's just we don't, because I mean, I also remember in the Schmidt group, it was insane, like how much we had to dwell on certain elements and you had to talk about perception at the beginning. And then eventually it wasn't really necessary anymore. We all kind of had it like in the back of our minds and we were able to just kind of be more pedantic about the text, you know, and just not have to be so big picture. I mean, I love being big picture and that's really important for me, but sometimes it, like, especially in this case, it's just super overwhelming and just being able to focus on a detail and realize I understand it feels like a huge victory. So, you know, that's just my 2 cents about that.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, I think we need to, in philosophy, you have to earn the big picture. Because, So,
hey, Michael.
Yeah.
Just, I know we're in after hours and I've been burning. Everybody seems to know you, or many of us seem to know you. I don't know you. Who are you? Can you just give me like 2 minutes of a little biography? How in the heck did you get yourself in this position of talking about Aristotle this way and being interested in it?
He thinks, therefore he is.
Yeah. He's the Socrates of Portland.
Socrates. That is high praise, Garth. Thank you. I appreciate that. I started, I was originally going to be a vet and went to college and started reading philosophy accidentally and became a philosophy religious studies major in Boston. Because in the religious studies department is where they had all the cool philosophy courses. The philosophy department itself was somewhat antiseptically analytic. And then I decided I didn't want to go into massive debt studying philosophy for the rest of my life. So I used my German language and went to Germany and studied philosophy. I got a degree in philosophy and sociology and studied there for 10 years. With some amazing philosophers, among whom Gadamer is probably the most well-known. So I got to do seminars with Gadamer and yeah, I knew a lot of people who knew Heidegger, and it was a very intense, wonderful experience. And then I came back and I did all but the finished dissertation in Chicago at Loyola Chicago, and then through a series of unfortunate circumstances, I stopped doing that and decided that I was just going to do philosophy in the wild because it suited my skill set better. So, so I've been studying philosophy basically nonstop since 1982, and
thank you so much.
I think part of what Clark's question was about is why you were so well known, because before the COVID
I thought it was like
time,
biography. Sorry, yeah,
there was a Portland philosophy group which we all met. So like half of us are all in the Portland philosophy group, and we know each other sort of out of school, as it were.
That's right.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I took over this
Love
group.
Took
over a group called Drunken Philosophy here in Portland, and it just turned. It was a completely degenerate mess, and then but I did meet people like it was Peter and Tyler. I think are the only ones from that group, and we pulled ourselves out of this cesspool of drunken philosophers and started reading Kant together with another group that was a Nietzsche study group. And so we kind of combined groups, and then we started doing, and then Tim came along, and then Garth and Sandy and Charles. We started with Kant, and then the Nietzsche group dissolved, and we kind of turned it into a Greek studies group. Instead of a Nietzsche group. And then that's the Schmidt book that everybody's referencing is what really, I think, brought us together. And Bo was part of that group as well. And Mike was part of the Kant group. And so the point with the Schmidt book was it pointed out all the ways in which moderns misunderstand Greek thought. And really, it was a very dense